Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful that our system of politics is corrupt. That's too strong.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
And a very dapper John Idarola sporting a tie that I bought him for his birthday one year.
Why you said it.
Yes,
but thank you. Yes, I did wear it, and for you actually.
It has little dogs on it.
Yes, it
so
is.
Cute.
I love it.
Anyway,
I just want to be close to dogs. That's all, and now I am.
Yes, very. We have a great show ahead for you. Yes, we are going to discuss Elizabeth Warren's campaign going negative. That's later in the show.
What'd she say?
It's a big story. It's been developing all weekend and came to a head today. But before we get to that, there's a lot to update you guys on when it comes to foreign policy, particularly Trump's strategy or lack of strategy when it comes to Iran. And then later, I want to end the show with a little bit of fun. We're going to show you some funny videos featuring some woman named Caitlyn Bennett. She apparently worked for Alex Jones back in the day. Anyway, she's insane, but that doesn't matter. The videos that she's produced are wonderfully funny and humiliating for her, which makes me question why she put them out there. So we'll talk about that later. But before we do, I just want to make a quick announcement about programming. This week is the Iowa debate. So Democrats will be debating in Iowa tomorrow, and TYT will have special coverage of that debate starting at 11 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. Pacific. You can check us out live at tyt.com/live. And on the panel, we'll have John Idarola, Ida Rodriguez, Cenk Uygur, and myself. It's funny because I keep forgetting that Cenk is going to be on with us.
I know, it seems weird that he's going to be there at all.
I know. So he's campaigning, as we all know, but he will be here to help us cover the debate. So
and you know what? I'm just gonna guess it might be kind of a fiery debate.
Well, considering the news today, I think that's a good guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with Iran. That story continues to develop. New reporting indicates that the Trump administration did not actually see Qasem Soleimani, Iran's top military general, as an imminent threat. In fact, the reporting indicates that Trump considered assassinating him 7 months ago. Let's give you some of those details, but actually, you know what? A story broke right before we went on the air, and the story included Donald Trump admitting that it doesn't even matter if Soleimani was an imminent threat. Via Twitter, he wrote, "The fake news media and their Democrat partners are working hard to determine whether or not the future attack by terrorist Soleimani was imminent or not. And my team in agreement, the answer to both is a strong yes, but it doesn't matter because of his horrible past." Now, his previous tweet misspelled imminent, not that it really matters. He misspells all sorts of things. He spelled it with an E. He's a moron. Anyway, but
I think he thinks that imminent domain is like, it's about to happen now. Maybe. I don't know if he knows what those meanings are.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But look, Everyone was skeptical of the claims that Soleimani was an imminent threat, that he had planned something that threatened US soldiers or anyone's life. Because look, if they had that intel, we all know that the Trump administration would share it, and they would share it happily, aggressively. But every single time we saw either Mike Pompeo or Mark Esper give an interview, they really struggled to answer any specific questions about the so-called imminent threat. Now, let's go back to the previous reporting before this tweet happened that indicated that Trump had considered assassinating Soleimani 7 months ago. The presidential directive in June came with the condition that Trump would have final sign-off on any specific operation to kill Soleimani. The timing, however, could undermine the Trump administration's stated justification for ordering the US drone strike that killed Soleimani in Baghdad on January 3rd. Officials have said Soleimani was planning an imminent attack on Americans and had to be stopped. Now, just over the weekend, Mark Esper, who is the defense secretary, struggled to answer questions about the so-called imminent threat. Let's take a look.
Why was there a difference?
What the president said was he believed that it probably and could have been attacks against additional embassies. I shared that view. I know other members of the national security team shared that view.
Probably and could have been. That sounds more like an assessment than a specific, tangible threat with a decisive piece of intelligence.
Well, the president didn't say there was a tangible, he didn't cite a specific piece of evidence. What he said is he believed.
Are you saying there wasn't one?
I didn't see one with regard to 4 embassies.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't see one with regard to the embassies. So you see a little bit of a contradiction there based on what you heard from other Trump administration officials and Trump himself.
Yeah, and even that, which is, it's laying bare that Trump just made up the 4 embassies thing. It's still like trying to imply that there might have been something to what Trump was saying, but if there was no evidence, and there was not only no evidence, there was nothing that could be twisted to look like evidence, because they would grasp at straws if they had them to grasp at. What was it, a hunch? Was it a gut feeling? He'd been thinking a lot about embassies recently. He came up with a specific scenario that's not founded in intelligence to try to get critics off his back for almost launching us into a conflict with Iran.
Right.
That's horrifying.
Right.
And even then, that NBC, I think it was NBC, that graphic you had up was like, it could call into question, like at this point, they still can't say, he lied, he is lying. He's lying to justify military action, and if he gets away with it now, he will do it in the future.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was the specific reason why I chose to order that graphic for the show. Because at this point, there's irrefutable evidence indicating that Trump did not see Soleimani as an imminent threat. I mean, the whole purpose of reporting this story is that Trump did not actually see Soleimani as an imminent threat. Okay, so why does this all matter? I want to reiterate, because some people might have missed our previous coverage on this. Listen, we're supposed to live in a country that has a system of checks and balances. The Trump administration, meaning the executive branch, unilaterally decided to assassinate a top official, a top Iranian official. That matters because Congress had no say. In order for Trump to do this unilaterally, he has to show that there was an imminent threat and that it did not make sense to wait for congressional authorization to go after Soleimani, right? Because time is of the essence, it's an imminent threat. Imminent threat means it's about to happen, right? And so he has failed to prove that there was an imminent threat. He has undermined our democratic process, undermined our system of checks and balances. For all those so-called constitutionalists out there, or people who self-identify as constitutionalists, what happened? What happened? You're gonna defend Donald Trump on this? Because this goes against our entire system of government, right? So that's why it matters. And then of course you have to think about the ramifications and whether or not there was a strategy here. Because of Trump's actions, the situation with Iran escalated to the point where there were missile strikes against US bases in Iraq, and unfortunately an aircraft was accidentally shot down by the Iranians, right? So innocent people died as a result of Trump's knee-jerk reaction to protests at the embassy in Iraq.
And let's bear in mind that since we're talking about a fear of a precedent having already been set, during that briefing, when Mike Lee and Rand Paul had all these hard questions for the people that were briefing them, they gave the hypothetical. This standard that you believe you can exist under, where you don't have to notify us of what you're gonna do, is that a thing where it caps out at like military commander, like above that, certainly then you would tell us. And they were like, no, they're not gonna, even if they were taking out the supreme leader of Iran, there would be no notification. And so that whole constitutional thing where the legislative branches, or Congress, or the House I should say, is supposed to declare war is nonsense. We can assassinate leadership in North Korea or any other country if we want to, and we will throw our country into a war, to hell with the checks and balances.
Exactly. It's just so problematic for so many reasons. And again, there are the self-identified constitutionalists out there who will defend what Trump just did. But more importantly, there are the people out there who worry about too much government power, right? Or too much power concentrated in any single branch of the government. The executive branch, if we allow this precedent to stand, which we will because Democrats are weak and they're not gonna fight back hard enough, then future presidents, or Trump 2.0, right? Who knows if he's gonna get reelected or not, will be emboldened by this unchecked power. And that's a very dangerous precedent to set.
And think about, I agree, the Democrats should have done much more, and hopefully some of them will. I'm gonna talk with Ro Khanna tomorrow, he's trying to do something. But the Republicans are getting, Republicans, I guess, the believers in a unitary executive are getting a huge assist from the media here. Because if you wanted a test case of the most laughably pathetic effort to lie about the justification for a war, it's being provided in real time.
Right.
This isn't like a presentation before the UN and there's satellite photos and it's like, well, what does that dot really mean? And there's like all this different stuff coming out over the course of months. This is Trump in real time, like, it was the embassies, I don't know, 4 embassies, whatever, it doesn't even matter if it was. And the media is still like, calls into question something.
Right.
These are the watchdogs the next time we go to the brink with Iran?
I mean, come on, watchdogs, come on.
I guess.
Come on.
These are the toy poodles.
Toy poodles is kind to.
Poodles are fierce, actually. I have heard that.
Charlie, my dog, is part mini poodle, and he's a very fierce dog. All right, well, let's move on to a different angle to this story, and that has to do with protests that have erupted in Iran. So, Iran has officially taken responsibility for the Ukraine-bound plane crash that took place last week. It was soon after droves of protesters actually took to the streets. This is following Iran's admission that they accidentally shot down that plane. Now, anti-government protests erupted in Iran after government officials admitted that Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 was mistakenly shot down by an Iranian missile shortly after departing from the Imam Khomeini International Airport. The crash killed 176 people on board. At that point, droves of protesters in Tehran could be seen in footage released by the news service attempting to flee as tear gas is fired into the crowd by Iranian police. Now, understand that before the Trump administration decided to assassinate Iran's top military general, Iran was already dealing with mass protests. And the mass protests had to do with the fact that the Iranian regime is being blamed, rightfully so, for a lot of cultural repression, but also the economic stress that a lot of Iranians are under. That economic stress is part of what the Trump administration is purposely doing to Iran. They pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, as we all know, in 2018, and then Trump re-implemented sanctions and slapped on even more sanctions than before the Iran nuclear deal, and that has really crippled the Iranian economy. And so people are hungry, they're frustrated, they're angry with the government there for a lot of legitimate reasons as well. The way that the US media is reporting this really leaves out that context and makes it appear as though the protest is only about this flight that was accidentally struck down. That is not the case. The Iranian community is just like the community in any other country, citizens in any other country. They have legitimate grievances with the government. They have legitimate grievances in regard to their economic situation. But nonetheless, the way that they have been met with violence by the Iranian police is something that should also be covered. Now, we're gonna show you a video. Let's keep our mics up because I wanna talk a little more about what's going on in the video that we're gonna show you. Some of these videos are making their way onto social media. As you can see, there are mass protests. Some of the videos do show that the protesters are met with an insane amount of violence, including with tear gas that's fired into the crowds. The Iranian government and Iranian police are denying that this is happening. In fact, General Hussein Rahimi, who heads Tehran's police, told local media that his officers shot tear gas in some areas to diffuse protests. However, he denied his officers used live ammunition on demonstrators. Look, I take that with a giant grain of salt. It would not be surprising if the police met the protesters with live ammunition, especially in a country like Iran.
And look, if you want goodwill, I don't know, you said for a couple of days that it was mechanical problems in the plane before you finally admitted that a missile had gone missing somehow.
Right.
And so I don't think that those protesters are gonna extend a lot of goodwill towards the government.
Right, exactly. Look, I stand in solidarity with those protesters. I think that they have a lot of legitimate concerns. At the same time, though, don't be fooled at the way that US media is kind of spinning this. Also understand that the US government wants an uprising in Iran. That's what the Trump administration was banking on before they decided to assassinate the top military general. Once they did that, there was some sort of unity in the country because there was anger and frustration toward what Donald Trump had done. Because understand, this is a sovereign country. The people of Iran, for the most part, want to determine where the future of the country goes toward, right? But the Trump administration is coming in and making decisions about all sorts of things, including how their economy is going to be affected by, our aggressive actions toward Iran. And so he put out this tweet, and this is what he put out in Farsi, by the way. To the brave and suffering Iranian people, I have stood with you since the beginning of my presidency, and my government will continue to stand with you. We are following your protest closely. Your courage is inspiring. Let's just get one thing clear. If there is unrest, suffering, to the point where you have a refugee crisis, refugees coming out of Iran, what do you think the Trump administration is gonna say to those Iranian refugees?
Continue to block them from entering the United States?
100%.
Yeah.
He does not stand in solidarity with them. I think most of them know that.
Maybe like in solidarity on the opposite side of some sort of barrier.
Right.
Yeah, that's about as much as they're gonna get. And everybody knows that. Nobody thinks that he's actually a fighter for human rights internationally. That's what he's about.
He's not a fighter for human rights in the United States. He's not a fighter for anything or anyone other than Donald Trump.
It's nonsense. And whenever we talk about situations like this happening in other countries, I feel the need to say something that's gonna sound stupid, but like, Americans learn so little about other countries and about the people of other countries. When they see the media talking, like God help us, every Trump supporter, what do they think about the Iranian people right now? Like the insane stories they're being told by Fox News. It is a culture of its own with diverse groups that have different goals, some of whom support the government, some of whom don't. Some of them are obsessed with the same sort of historical things that you are, some of them are not. It's as full and diverse as our country in literally every other way, but nobody thinks of other countries in that way. We develop at best an extremely shallow idea of what the lives of other people are like. And then we as a populace are supposed to evaluate our government's actions towards that population, a population that we don't know anything about. At best case scenario, we have minimal empathy for. It's frustrating when something like this happens because I don't trust our government in regard to the Iranian people. I don't trust most of the American people in regard to the Iranian people.
Well, I think you make a really good point, and I think that the way that education is structured in America purposely leaves us in the dark about other countries. Because think about it, if you're ignorant about other countries, then you're susceptible to the narratives pushed by our government about those countries. So that'll help garner support for military invasions, maybe preemptive wars. And when it comes to governments that are doing things right, right? Let's say all those other developed countries that have universal health care. If you're not knowledgeable about that, then you'll just think that the system we have in place here, where people will literally find themselves in financial ruin from one medical emergency, is normal. That's what you can expect from the greatest country in the world. No, we're not ignorant on these issues by accident. It is very much on purpose. And it's about time that we fight back against that. That's why, while the internet comes with a host of issues and problems that we've talked about on this show, one of the greatest things is that it does democratize information. It's just we have to fight to find a way to get the right information to people so they're not misled.
I agree.
Because that stuff is out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, lots of updates on the election. Where's Cory Booker? What is he doing? Has he dropped out? I think you can guess what that story is all about. And then later, Elizabeth Warren goes negative on Bernie Sanders. That story has me in a rage, so we'll talk about that and more.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win, she's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun, it's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cory.
Populist left wing with a gigantic victory in Mexico.
Senator Gillibrand, you have made a pledge to no longer accept corporate PAC money.
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland. For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This
That's
is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
Let's
flamingo.
flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word.
Okay.
This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually gonna show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Before we get to the rest of the news, I wanted to read a few member comments in TYT Lives. Liberal mathematician says, I have a feeling my fellow burners are a little fired up tonight. Time for Anna to bring the fire. I'm in like a ridiculously good mood. I don't know what happened. Like I woke up in a good mood, I've remained in a good mood, but like I am fired up about that story. I will bring the fire when that story comes up, but not yet. Okay, let's hold. Lesbi Progressive says, love watching Anna and John. It makes my day. My girlfriend got me a membership for my birthday. I'm loving it. Thank you for helping my progressive outlook grow. Hashtag Bernie 2020. Thank you. That's really nice of your girlfriend. I love that. Nice. It's a very good gift, gift of membership. Gabby Marina says, shouldn't this be an obvious impeachable abuse of power? Or is that only a thing when it involves digging up dirt on Biden? It is amazing. Like it is amazing that they're hyper focused on that Biden part of the impeachment, but nothing else.
I think that argument works better when they were initially setting it up. It's like, why are you limiting this? I do get that you can't keep adding things, really. Like they already voted, it already happened. Hypothetically, you could.
I mean, they could
it complicates it to.
They could reopen the public hearings in the House and add more articles of impeachment.
But it is complicated.
Right. Right, and we all know that
the
Democratic establishment doesn't want to do anything complicated or hard or principled. Yeah.
Why wouldn't he do it again?
Of course. I mean, you guys, how many times? Like I know people get all fired up about this, right? Like people are so upset about that op-ed I wrote in The Hill. Nancy Pelosi enables Trump. She does it over and over and over again. She has fought progressives in the House more aggressively than she's fought Donald Trump. I know people will be like,
just to say she's fought them.
Right.
Really at all.
Right, and like people will say, well, how dare you say that? She has impeached Donald Trump. But think about the context in which she finally did that. When her precious Joe Biden was being attacked. That's what convinced her to do it.
Yeah.
But if Trump had done that to Bernie Sanders, I'm very curious how it would have played out. If he was
you think
hands
Pelosi
off,
would have voted for Trump?
I wouldn't be surprised. All right, TNC President Sanders in the TYT Live section says, the effing Secretary of Defense didn't see an imminent threat. Correct. And Real Time says, get away with it. Hell, he can nuke the world unchallenged from anyone, no questions asked. Oh, it's so devastating, yeah. I've been watching a lot of Noam Chomsky videos, like old Noam Chomsky videos while smoking weed. And I gotta say, man, he puts the fear of God in me, and I don't even believe in God. Like the way he talks about the nuclear arms race and just how close we've come to complete and utter obliteration is just, it's terrifying.
And we have a president who wants them to be more usable than they have been considered for more than half a century.
I know, yeah. So look, my point is don't smoke weed and watch Noam Chomsky because it'll freak you out. I got super paranoid. All right, I'm like, I gotta be in a bunker somewhere. Let's move on to election news. So, Cory Booker has decided to suspend his presidential campaign after failing to garner enough support, including enough in fundraising. So he made his announcement via Twitter, as many candidates often do these days, and he wrote, quote, "It's with a full heart that I share this news. I'm suspending my campaign for president. To my team, supporters, and everyone who gave me a shot, thank you. I am so proud of what we built, and I feel nothing but faith in what we can accomplish together." He also included a video, which we are about to show you a snippet of.
Today, I'm suspending my campaign for president with the same spirit with which it began. It is my faith in us, my faith in us together as a nation, that we share common pain and common problems that can only be solved with a common purpose and a sense of common cause. And so now I recommit myself to the work. I can't wait to get back on the campaign trail and campaign as hard as I can for whoever is the eventual nominee and for candidates up and down the ballot.
So I have no feelings about this. I think that
no feelings?
I have a few feelings about what happens next in terms of his supporters. Where do they go? Who do they support? Cory Booker did nothing to inspire me in particular, and that doesn't mean anything. It's just where I stand. But I do think that he brought up something that's a huge problem for a lot of people, not just Cory Booker. he was having a hard time raising enough money to even be in this race.
Yeah.
And that says something, right? I mean, it speaks to how difficult it is. He's not an average person. He's a US senator, right?
A well-known
US senator, and he's having a hard time raising money. What does that communicate to the rest of America? Average Americans who might have ambitions to be in politics, maybe not run for president, but run for Congress one day, right? It's very disheartening, very discouraging. And I really do wish we had a strong progressive running who happened to be a woman or a person of color. And unfortunately, the field is looking rather white. But I don't think that identity aspect of it should fuel your decision on who to support. I just wish that there was more representation for progressives in particular.
The thing, I talked about this a little bit on the Damage Report this morning. There were a bunch of people who were all sort of filling the same slot. Relatively well-known national names, a lot of them senators. Like all of them, almost all of them have dropped out now. And Buttigieg is in fourth.
Yeah, that does blow my mind.
Like that Cory Booker lost where Buttigieg won for that like fourth place or whatever.
Well, what's interesting
Seems crazy.
It does seem crazy, but what's interesting is that Buttigieg has support from Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley decided to place its bet on Buttigieg. And so you see a lot of support from Mark Zuckerberg and other Silicon Valley people. Elizabeth Warren has gotten a lot of support from former Obama administration officials. And when that was announced, you could notice a pretty significant shift in the way that she talked about progressive policies. She moved closer to the center as opposed to positioning herself as like this fierce, bold progressive. But with Cory Booker, I don't think he didn't really have the backing of any big, group of people, institution. You know what I'm saying?
It might have been that there was too many people in the field, and so the initial sort of spool up period, there were a bunch of different people that they were all like. Some of them went for Klobuchar, some of them went for Kamala Harris, some of them might have gone for Warren or Buttigieg or whoever, and there was just too many. I think that hypothetically, if you had a much smaller field, I think a lot of the people who want someone like Joe Biden to win hypothetically could have gone for someone like Cory Booker, who's not a radical by any means, and is well liked by the right sorts of establishment people, a much better campaigner, but really went nowhere in the end.
I think that Cory,
even Beto maybe in a similar sort, might have taken some of that potential support.
Possibly. So let's just quickly talk about where his support is likely to go. So one reporter that I actually really do like and trust, that's hard to find these days, is Daniel Morans. He's a writer for Huffington Post, and he had tweeted the following: voters who told me Booker was their first choice, and I met one as recently as last night, tend to list Warren, Buttigieg, or Klobuchar as their first pick. In places where he did not achieve viability, that would have helped them. Does having him out help them even more? So just a little look into who Cory Booker supporters are likely to back following his suspension.
And I saw a survey that showed that there was no standout in terms of the breakdown. The second choice after Booker, it tended to go in a bunch of different directions. And I mean, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but it's not like there were tons anyway at this point in the campaign. So the effect is probably gonna be pretty diluted. I doubt you're gonna really notice it, honestly.
Yeah.
Even if he does choose to lead them in a direction, which is possible but not guaranteed. If he doesn't, then it's probably just gonna sort of spread to everyone.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do a deep dive into all of this Bernie versus Warren stuff that happened over the weekend, and a hideous, ridiculous story that was reported by CNN today that puts this ridiculous accusation on Bernie Sanders. We're going to dissect that as well. And I'll do my best to remain measured and calm as I share the details of that story and more. Come right back.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now I know what you're thinking, Jerry, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago. when I realized that I was gonna have to wear makeup on the show, I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. At least I do. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial how to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up. Couple streaks. This is the guy way of putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. They'll say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
This isn't Anderson Cooper. If you say some BS, I'm not simply going to let it slide and then move on to the next thing.
This is what the establishment does not understand about politics. You can change the conversation.
This is my place in that broader revolution.
We first have to fight to prove that we are human. We then have to fight for our freedom. Then we fight for our equality. And now we are fighting for our survival because your militarized police force thinks it's okay to shoot us at any point in time.
Look at what's happening in society today, and it's hard not to think about what was going on in the 50s and 60s.
We're all out here. Everybody that cares about where this country's going, we're out here.
We are going to win this fight. We are going to transform this country.
Whoever wins this primary wins the seat.
We just took down one of the top establishment Democrats in the country. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley.
This is the beginning.
What do we got? We got TYT in the house.
Best moment of my life, I guess, would have to be when the kid was born. Like, you know, because suddenly that meant I served my purpose. Very close second, the day we sold Clerks. That changed my life. In fact, Harley wouldn't have been born if I hadn't sold Clerks. So that noise. Clerks, probably the biggest day, best day of my life. It led to everything else. I got the wife and the kid because Clerks happened. So don't tell the kid, but Clerks.
Our teachers are suffering, and we won't even cut 10% of the money going to military contract.
The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities.
A tiny sliver of the defense budget would pay for 395,000 teachers.
We're talking about the future of the country. We're talking about the nation's youth and making sure that we are competitive globally. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we provide quality education for our young people. Welcome back to TYT, Anna and John with you. I'm just gonna read one quick comment because I wanna dedicate the rest of this lengthy segment to probably the biggest story in the day. Pocket in a Pocket, one of my favorite handles, says, Anna watching Chomsky while getting high is proof that she's on a higher level, a level I aspire to be on. It's really not that hard. I mean, just live in a state where you can get it easily, which is pretty much every state at this point. And watch Chomsky videos, they're amazing.
You know, it's not inconceivable that you could get high and watch Chomsky with Chomsky. That would be an experience.
Yeah, by the way, he's salty on a different level, right? Like, have you guys noticed that? He He was interviewed by this one Jordan Peterson loving student, or at least it appeared to be that way. And he kept asking these questions to like own the libs. And Chomsky was just like not having it. It was a really fascinating video. If I can find it, we might talk about it on a post game. Not today, but on someday this week.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that said, let's move on.
You say you need someone though who every Democrat can get behind. Is that not Bernie Sanders?
I believe we need someone every Democrat can get behind. I'm out there fighting for every Democrat.
That's Elizabeth Warren, who has decided to take her campaign in a negative direction toward Bernie Sanders. And this is something that really developed over the weekend. It's disappointing and disheartening to see this because I thought that Elizabeth Warren was better than this. But apparently she has some advisors on her campaign that are giving her bad advice. And this is an example of it. Now, there was this accusation, it was written in Politico, about how Bernie Sanders had directed members of his campaign to attack Elizabeth Warren, that they had put out some sort of attack script on Slack.
Or at least the campaign had.
Or at least the campaign had, but it was reported as if he directed it, right? And then Elizabeth Warren was asked about it, and she goes with this narrative and then attempts to fundraise off of it. So that's the skeleton version of the story, but let me fill in the blanks. While speaking to reporters, Elizabeth Warren said this about Bernie Sanders: "We cannot nominate someone who takes big chunks of the Democratic coalition for granted. We need someone who will bring our party together." And throughout her statement, she kept making references to Bernie Sanders in 2016. These are accusations by establishment Democrats about how Bernie Sanders was so divisive and so terrible to Hillary Clinton that he really created this wedge among people on the left, voters on the left. And so here's—
even though he worked his butt off to try to get her elected.
Yeah, here's the thing, okay? A primary is when you are running against members of your own party to show voters that you're the best candidate, right?
Better than the others?
Right, that's what it's about. Believe it or not.
But then they won't win.
Right, right. This is the most ridiculous thing. So what did the script say, okay? Her comments following a town hall came after Politico reported that Sanders' campaign had developed a script. This is how they reported it: that Sanders' campaign had developed a script instructing volunteers to criticize Warren as appealing to highly educated, more affluent people, and say that she was bringing no new bases into the Democratic Party. First of all, if I were to give Politico the benefit of the doubt in their reporting here, in the way that they're characterizing it here, and if Bernie Sanders had indeed directed his campaign to put out this script, I would call that campaigning. It is not a personal attack. It is not any type of below the belt, lowbrow attack. It is simply a statement about the coalition that she has built, the way her coalition differs from his coalition, which is not made up of majority white affluent people, right? He has a much more diverse coalition. Highlighting that while you're campaigning in the primary is called common sense. But even so, Bernie has come out and said, no, this was not something directed by me. It was not directed by my campaign. In fact, he said the following. He said, let me get to his statement. We have hundreds of employees. Elizabeth Warren has hundreds of employees, and people sometimes say things they shouldn't. Warren is a friend of mine. No one is going to be attacking Elizabeth.
Just how he always talks.
He's been abundantly clear in that he doesn't want like this dirty campaign. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want, but it is important to highlight and emphasize the differences between your campaign, what you stand for, and what the other Democrats running in this primary represent. And so Elizabeth Warren took this and said the following while questioned by a reporter. Take a look.
I was disappointed to hear that Bernie is sending his volunteers out to trash me. Bernie knows me and has known me for a long time. He knows who I am, where I come from, what I have worked on and fought for, and the coalition and grassroots movement we're trying to build. Democrats won't win in 2020. We all saw the impact of the factionalism in
So she's accusing Bernie Sanders of telling his volunteers to trash me. Okay, he's not doing that. In fact, the very script that was promptly taken down from Slack included this line: I like Elizabeth Warren. In fact, she's my second choice, but here's my concern about her. It then pivots to the criticisms of Warren, meaning, highlighting the differences between the two coalitions. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know I like Elizabeth Warren was trashing Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, for one thing, I know that a lot of people are saying like it definitely didn't exist. They never did. I don't find it hard to believe that someone in the campaign came up with that script, because what they're describing, the things they're focusing on about Warren, those are just demographic truths. You can look and see if they're true or not. You can look at the surveys and see who supports her, who doesn't support her.
So is Elizabeth
They do tend
Warren-
to be more affluent. They do tend to be whiter. That's simply true. It's not trashing.
So is she embarrassed by the people who support her in her campaign?
I mean, I
Is
would
it
probably
bad
want a
to
different
highlight
makeup. Yeah, if I could choose my demographic makeup and my supporters, I'd probably want it to be different. And so I know some people want to deny that there's that anything happened on the Sanders side. No, I think that they put that together and it's perfectly fine. It's a campaign. They should be saying stuff like that. And most of her response, I also think is, yeah, we're campaigning, we're gonna attack each other. The thing where she talked about 2016, I think that is purposefully playing into completely untrue myths about that election.
And that's unacceptable.
Which goes beyond any campaign.
Unacceptable, right?
Exactly.
When you're using Hillary Clinton's talking points, when you're using establishment Democrat talking points to go after Bernie Sanders because you don't like the fact that some members of his campaign wanted to highlight the differences in who supports which campaign, then you lose me, right? Like you lose me. And I look, I've been critical of Elizabeth Warren when it's appropriate to be critical of her. I did not think that she was, the same as Hillary Clinton. Some people I thought were demonizing her too much. But now, seeing that she's using these tactics, I really think that she should change course and do so immediately, because this is not working out for her. She noticed a significant dip in the polls when she decided to listen to her moronic strategists and move to the center. Don't move to the center. You saw that it hurt you, so own up to that. Don't try to deflect by accusing Bernie Sanders of doing something, unacceptable or too hurtful. You're running in a primary. You're running in a primary. You're better than this. You're better than this. This is so pathetic. Go ahead.
Everyone doesn't get that this is an election. Like all the media coverage is like,
they get
how
it's
dare
an
they?
election.
How
They get it.
dare
They get it when Bernie Sanders is attacked.
Uh-huh.
When he's attacked, it's an election. It's a primary. Poor Bernie
one great
Sanders.
example,
He's the victim, right?
I think one
But
great
when
example of that.
He does like a tiny. I'm gonna keep it real. Bernie Sanders, I think, doesn't go far enough. I think he should emphasize the differences between his campaign and his opponents more aggressively, and I think he should call them out, right? And guess what? They're gonna come after you, Bernie. They're gonna come after his supporters. They're gonna come after him. They're gonna accuse them of everything, racism, sexism, whatever they can pull out of their back pocket to smear him. Who cares? Because what matters at the end of the day are the issues, right? He's been focusing on the issues and he's been staying away from any type of negative campaigning. And unfortunately, his opponents aren't following that same strategy. His opponents will attack him the first second they see that he's rising in the polls, and that's exactly what happened. They saw that the polls came out indicating that he's leading in Iowa and New Hampshire, some of these early states, and they're like, all right, gloves are off, let's go. First they minimized him, belittled him, ignored him, and then once he sees a little rise in the polls, they come after him like this. And the fact that Elizabeth Warren is playing into this nonsense, I think is pathetic, because I think she's right on a lot of issues, right? I think that she's a strong candidate. And rather than focus on that, rather than do a course correction after her strategist led her astray, she has decided to double down on this dumb strategy, and it's not gonna work out for her.
Yeah, any strategy that involves like not just demonizing the candidate, but unnecessarily antagonizing their base is a horrible idea if you aim to someday get those people to support you. That is something that the candidates should focus on. I think it's one of the reasons that Bernie Sanders generally attacks as little as he does. He doesn't want to just set fire to the other candidates' bases. He wants to eventually convert them over to supporting him.
That is what he wants.
The candidate has to focus on it. I think that people in the media that are advocating for one candidate need to do that. her switching up in that way, like if you're Elizabeth Warren, you need Bernie Sanders supporters to eventually switch over to you if you hope to ever beat Biden. If somehow it's you or Biden, you need Bernie Sanders supporters. And so this is a horrible angle to go in. In terms of the not getting that it's an election, I personally think that this story is much less
egregious.
Personally egregious and offensive is the one that we're about to go to. But the media, the way that they've pitched this is the two progressives have taken the gloves off, as if they've both equally changed the way that they're operating. Bernie Sanders, assuming that that's authentic, and I don't personally find it to be all that offensive to assume that it is, that is like the lightest form of just purely factual criticism possible.
And if you can't handle someone stating the obvious about your campaign, which is insanely mild, what are you gonna do if you end up on a debate stage with Donald Trump?
Well, Donald Trump is really polite. He would never say anything underhanded.
Right, no, come on.
He already is and did today, in fact, against her.
Be strong and understand that you're in a primary and that people are gonna highlight the differences between their campaigns and your campaign. And if you can't handle that and you immediately jump to nonsense, which she unfortunately further did today, then you don't have a winning strategy. And it's just really sad to see this. Now, I wanna give you some more components of this story that are important to know about. First off, a Bernie Sanders volunteer apparently hit back against the narrative that we're seeing in the media about this so-called script. And this is what the tweet said. Here's what actually happened. A random user who's only ever posted once before posted that document in the Sanders volunteer Slack group. A moderator promptly removed it and stated that it was not a campaign source. So look, I don't know 100% what the truth is. I'm inclined to just believe this, but at the same time, I think you're right.
It's so not inflammatory that I don't even care, really.
Exactly.
Like it's so mild.
If Bernie Sanders himself put that script together and we have irrefutable evidence indicating that, I still don't care because he didn't do anything offensive. Again, this is a primary, okay? It's a primary. He's running against Elizabeth Warren. Now, if he had come out with personal attacks against her, if he said, look, if Bernie Sanders came out and made fun of the way she was dancing, I'd be super turned off by that, okay? That is the type of stuff I don't want to see from Bernie Sanders. But
you never will.
And I never will because that's not who he is. But what I do want to see is how he differs from the other candidates. That is the whole point of the primary. And if Elizabeth Warren can't handle it, and if she and her advisors decide that the best strategy is to pivot away from progressive policies and attack Bernie Sanders in a lowbrow way, she's gonna lose.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know if this is me sort of weirdly being baited, but I think he should start to run on that script because think about specifically what he's pointing out. He's pointing out sort of the inverse of the ridiculous lies that have been told about Sanders' base for 3 or 4 years now. That it has been pitched as something that it never was. It has always been more diverse racially and in terms of the breakdown of the genders that are supporting him than had been pitched by the media from the very beginning. He is more diverse in that way than Elizabeth Warren and most of the other candidates too. He does bring in new people to vote in a way that, as it stands right now, she does not appear to, and she's not alone in that, certainly. I think that him focusing on something that is indeed his strength, that has been pitched as his weakness, makes all the sense in the world. If the media is not going to tell the truth, then he does need to get out in front and do it.
Yeah, you know why it makes all the sense in the world? Because we're in a primary, right? We're in a primary, and you're right.
I'm starting to suspect that Bernie wants to win and doesn't want the others to.
It's so weird,
and
right?
I think that's all right.
Listen, when Elizabeth Warren was claiming credit or taking credit for Medicare for all, as if that was her policy, he didn't even hit her back on that, and it was honestly infuriating as someone who's watching this election move forward, because it's like, but you're the one who wrote that legislation. How are you gonna let her take credit for it?
Well,
but
really
Elizabeth Warren, unfortunately, has terrible political instincts. And what I mean by that is she got goaded into releasing nonsense details of how she would pay for it, where she lied and said that it wouldn't be a middle class tax increase. That was strike one. And then she went off with her transition plan that made it abundantly clear to me, anyone who has like 2 brain cells, that she isn't actually serious about Medicare for all, because if you're gonna try to do it in like a 2-tiered way, like where you start off with a public option and then in your 3rd year, try to transition to Medicare for all.
That's known as the easy year.
It's not gonna, it's not gonna happen. So her political instincts are off. I think that the way that she rolled out those policy proposals, gave you a sense of that. But what she's doing now is far worse, because she has chosen to go at him, hit at him, and do these like smear tactics, as opposed to like taking a step back and looking at the various reasons why she's dipping in the polls, right? Course correction, that's what you do. And instead she's decided to deflect by using this nonsense, strategy. I just don't agree with it, and I think it's dumb.
Yep.
All right, well, let's move on to this story that we're about to do is actually worse, and this broke today, so let's get to it. CNN is reporting, with the use of anonymous sources, that Bernie Sanders allegedly told Elizabeth Warren that women cannot win the presidency. So
and
again,
he spit on her. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? He spit on her too. That's what I heard. It was from an anonymous source.
My sources told me, okay, I spoke to 4 anonymous sources, and they told me that Elizabeth Warren made this up. See what I did there, right? Now, obviously, I don't have 4 sources that talked to me and told me that. But this story is just gross. Look, I get that there are stories that rely on anonymous sources, but the way that this was reported and the receipts that we're about to show you, which of course show you who Bernie Sanders is as a person and what he actually thinks about women. Make it clear that this story is nothing more than a hit piece. And so let me get through the details and we'll discuss.
Sure.
So first, let me give you the response from Bernie Sanders, who is outraged by this ridiculous article by CNN. He says, "It is ludicrous to believe that at the same meeting where Elizabeth Warren told me she was going to run for president, I would tell her that a woman couldn't win. It's sad that 3 weeks before the Iowa caucus and a year after that private conversation, staff who weren't in the room are lying about what happened. What I did say that night was that Donald Trump is a sexist, a racist, and a liar who would weaponize whatever he could. Do I believe a woman can win in 2020? Of course. After all, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes in 2016. And in fact, Bernie Sanders campaigned rather aggressively on behalf of Hillary Clinton after she was the Democratic nominee in 2016. So why would he waste his time campaigning aggressively for someone who he believed had no chance in winning? So there's that, right?
I love that we can't get people to accept that.
I know, but those people don't matter because they're not honest actors. So let's not waste our time trying to debate with dishonest people who rely on a woman whose real name is Michelle Curry, who smears people on the left all over Twitter, right? Those are the kinds of people who will take out of context videos just to put out all sorts of claims and nonsense about people. And yes, I used your name, just like how you use it on social media all the time. So you've doxed yourself, homegirl. Let's move on to the rest of the news. So look, if you think that Bernie Sanders doesn't believe that a woman can be elected president because there's so much sexism in the country, I just want to remind you that another person who believes that is Hillary Clinton and her surrogates, who kept saying incessantly that the reason why she lost is because of sexism in the country. But Bernie Sanders actually doesn't believe that, okay? Bernie Sanders has a long history of believing that women can be in positions of power in this country. And we have 2 specific examples for you. First video is from 1988. Take a look.
The real issue is not whether you're black or white, whether you're a woman or a man. In my view, a woman could be elected president of the United States. The real issue is, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of workers and poor people, or are you on the side of big money and the corporations?
So, I want to watch that one more time. Sorry, I want to replay that video because it's important to pay close attention to what he said there.
The real issue is not whether you're black or white, whether you're a woman or a man. In my view, a woman could be elected president of the United States. The real issue is, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of workers and poor people, or are you on the side of big money and the corporations?
A woman can be elected president of the United States. That is a statement he made in 1988. I also want to note that Bernie Sanders was urging Elizabeth Warren to run in 2016. But
which seems like a waste of time because he doesn't think that they can win.
Yeah, it's
super
strange.
Why do that?
But maybe that's not enough evidence for you guys. So why don't we go to a video from 1987 where he talks about women running for president.
Have there ever been women mayor?
Not in Burlington. There have been, and there are women mayors all over the country. There's a woman governor, and who can tell me the name of our governor? Yep.
I think it's Madeline Kunin.
That's right, Madeline Kunin. And Governor Kunin is a woman. And there are other, not a whole lot, I think there's one other woman governor. There are the mayor of San Francisco is a woman, and there are many women mayors, but not enough. And one of the very important things, and I hope that all the girls in this class understand, that you, just as much as the boys, have a right to become president. There's not been a woman president, although there was a woman who was giving thought to running for president this time, from Colorado, a woman named Representative Schroeder gave some thought. So I hope that the girls will think that they have the right to be involved in politics quite as much as the boys do. It's beginning to change, but it's not changing fast enough.
Again, Bernie Sanders in 1987 speaking to a third grade class, encouraging little girls to get involved in politics and essentially telling them, I believe, that a woman can be a president in this country.
Exactly.
Right? But
yeah.
So what did Elizabeth Warren say in response to CNN's reporting, right? Because as CNN mentioned, the description of that meeting is based on accounts of 4 people. 2 people Warren spoke directly with soon after the encounter, and 2 people familiar with the meeting. So they're people who know Warren, right? So Warren should know whether or not this type of reporting is accurate, if this is embellished in any way. No comment from the Warren campaign, none, 0, okay?
Which means
so there's
that we could have a conversation about who was the impetus for this, who planted this story. And I think it's likely one of the aides. Or potentially there's other people who stand to benefit, like Biden certainly benefits from this fighting between Bernie and Warren, but that only makes a difference if you come out and correct the record.
Exactly.
If you don't, then I don't care. I don't care who started it. You're now benefiting. You could correct the record, you could say something, but you're choosing not to.
And this conversation happened in December of 2018. The whole point of the private conversation that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren had was that they kind of had this pact that they would not run negative campaigns against one another. Now, look, what's a negative campaign? Negative campaign is when you do personal attacks and like hit jobs, things like that. But I don't believe it's a negative campaign when you're highlighting the differences in policy, the differences in what you see for the country. That's the whole point of a primary. Otherwise, what's the point in running?
Yeah, it's attacking the personality or the motivations, demonizing as opposed to differentiating, basically.
Exactly.
And the thing is, like, I'm glad that you had the historical footage, but for me, this is simply a common sense sort of situation. I think that this is knowingly the sort of story that when they printed it, when CNN chose to go with it, they knew the only people that are gonna buy this are the people who already want to believe that it's true of Bernie Sanders. Because which is more reasonable? That Bernie Sanders sat down with a woman who was going to be running against him in a long, hard fought primary and said something crazy to her, knowing that eventually it would come out, or that he said, yeah, Trump is gonna attack, he's gonna attack pretty much anybody on anything, which we all agree. Like if he had said in that meeting, Trump will attack a woman for being a woman, nobody disagrees with that. Literally nobody in the country doesn't think that that's true. Trump did it today against Warren in particular. And then, so she tells someone, and that aide, who obviously is biased towards Warren, embellishes it a little bit and turns it from an acknowledgement of how racist and sexist Donald Trump is to like a personal belief of Bernie Sanders, who actually believes that a politician as savvy as Bernie Sanders would do that, would provide that sort of ammunition to one of his rivals right before the election begins.
It's just not who he is, but it doesn't matter, right? They will characterize him as a sexist, as a racist, as anti-Semitic. I mean, we've seen it all. And it's not about protecting disenfranchised groups of people. It has nothing to do with that. These groups of people are nothing more than pawns for the Democratic establishment. The fact of that, what they want to do more than anything is destroy his campaign because he threatens their way of life, right? He threatens their profit motive. He threatens the private industries that fund various campaigns. He threatens all of it. He threatens the entire system. And so I'm embarrassed because I think back at my very long 13-year, career here at TYT, and I think of all the different times I naively fell for stories that were reported about various people allegedly being sexist or offensive or whatever, and I just have a lot of guilt because who knows what kind of misinformation I repeated, and I apologize profusely for that.
Yeah.
Okay, because I have realized now more than ever, and that's another embarrassing admission on my part, that the media is not what journalism is supposed to be. It wasn't what I bought into. It wasn't what inspired me to go to journalism school. They are simply extensions of corrupt political campaigns. That's why independent media is so incredibly important.
Yeah, and in particular that CNN on the eve of a debate that they're involved in would run with this story when they haven't talked to Elizabeth Warren. And think about the wording they use for their sources. 4 sources, 2 of which talked to her a year ago, which is already like a little bit suspect, but fine. And then 2 people familiar with the meeting. What does that even mean?
Right.
Does it mean anything other than, and then those 2 people talked to 2 other people?
Yes, that's
so
that's
they
what
were,
it means.
not only were they not in the meeting, because even the original 2 people weren't in the meeting, those other 2 didn't even talk to Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
So what is the point of including those 2 people? And it reminds me of in the aftermath of this story coming out, so CNN had their 4 people, and then someone I believe from BuzzFeed's like, oh, I can confirm the story too, independent confirmation. Who'd you talk to? The same aides. That's not independent confirmation. Those are the same sources. What are you talking about?
Yep, that's exactly
right. And yet
right.
it's considered confirmation because the bar for whether you run a story and whether you consider it confirmed is much lower if it's about Bernie Sanders. They don't care if they get it wrong.
Yep.
And if it affects the debate and if it affects the caucus, they don't care. But on top, I do want to give credit to Sean King. So he's been talking to people and he tweeted recently, just spoke to a source who told me that Elizabeth Warren admittedly embellished the words of Bernie Sanders to her friends after a meeting with him in 2018, saying that Bernie said a woman couldn't win, but they never actually said those words. Also, I reconfirmed with every outlet saying they confirmed their story about Bernie Sanders, and not a single one of them spoke to Warren. So if you speak to people who had a conversation with Warren more than a year ago, and you reach out to these 2 campaigns, and the Bernie campaign says it didn't happen, and the Warren campaign won't respond, how could you possibly go with that story?
Because it's not about the truth, it's about, again, being an extension of a political campaign. That's what this so-called reporting is, and it's so deceitful, it's so disgusting, and it's just transparent. And I want people to be aware of how transparent it is so you don't fall victim to this type of nonsense. Because sexism is real, there's no question about that. But I'm really tired of women being used as pawns, right? Because when push comes to shove, these people who are using or exploiting sexism for their political gain, are they actually gonna do anything to improve the lives of women? Are they proposing anything to really, are they gonna fight to improve the lives of women? That's what I wanna know. And look, I know Elizabeth Warren as a candidate has, but when it comes to the people who are aggressively smearing Bernie Sanders, who are using accusations of sexism to smear him, do you think they actually care about women and improving their lives? It's pathetic. And I leave you with this. Amanda Turkle wrote a piece in Huffington Post and she brought it back up for everyone's attention, to everyone's attention on Twitter. I wanted to just show you a quick screen grab of the headline. Joe Biden said Hillary Clinton faced sexism, but that's not going to happen with him. His campaign has clarified that he wasn't implying that women are less electable than men. Okay, so he had to make that clarification because he was essentially saying, no, I'm more electable than a woman because I don't have to worry about those accusations of sexism. Okay, so it's just amazing how, imagine if Bernie Sanders said something like that. Okay, that would be a huge story.
Or imagine if 4 people you didn't know said that he said it. Imagine that.
Front page. It's just incredible. And look, they can call Bernie supporters whatever they want. Bernie bros, they're divisive, they're this, they're that. But they have to fight back because if they don't, these types of lies just stand.
Yeah.
And it's unfair to a candidate who's anything but sexist.
Yeah. And as of, I mean, it's easy for us to say the CNN reporters obviously had too low of standards for going with the story. The editors didn't stop them. It's being put out at an opportune time. The aides are obviously biased. All of that is true. But as we're saying this right now, the story's been out there for hours and Elizabeth Warren hasn't said anything.
Hasn't said a word.
And that makes her a part of this.
We gotta take a quick break, but we have more on Biden when we come back. Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. No,
We'll see. We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy.
Cenk is oddly, scarily competitive.
Oh, it's insane. I play basketball against him. It's just like, how are you good at this?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Idarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons, are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Guns, baby. You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
The Hour of Fire is brought to you by Brooke, and Brooke.
Yes, Brooke's got it.
Okay.
Take it.
All
you
right.
guys know I really like compliments.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
Right, so that's it. We will settle it.
I want to see this.
Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't. Scandal at TYT.
You're a good foster.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. You don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
Which is my favorite channel. We're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you guys.
People work hard for what they have, and if you want more, you gotta do it yourself.
Stock stories bring headlines to life in an instant, whether you work on Wall Street or in Wichita. Stock report cards and professional analyst buy and sell ratings help gut check your thought process. Buy stock, take profits, and manage risk. And the Idea Feed is your daily one-stop investment shop with videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes, because you need ideas, not lectures, and live in-app chat for when you want to talk to someone, but you don't actually want to talk.
So what'd you think?
With unlimited commission-free stock trades and great ideas from real traders. Visit doe.com/TYT.
People still don't know what the word feminist actually means. Not even that, people are still angered by the word.
People think feminist is a bad word, but it's not.
There are gradations, there are different waves. The people who are against gender equality love to use like militant feminists as the representatives of all feminists. It's untrue.
I don't know why you'd be threatened by strong women unless you were an incredibly weak man. If you don't have equal rights, or you're not treated the same way, well, wouldn't you be angry?
Welcome back to TYT, Anna and John with you. Just a quick announcement, I will be on Cuomo tonight. I just was asked to do it and I said yes. So tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll be on Cuomo with Howard Dean. Not to debate, according to what they told me, but to have a discussion about a number of things, including this situation with Bernie and Warren.
You're gonna get after it, but gently. Calmly.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me disinvited, so I'm going to move on. Okay. Captain Cornball says, Anna, your mention of Chomsky gave me reason to explain who he is to my son. That's really good to hear. I love that. Disappointed Marlon Bundo says, I don't know how much of the blame you can place on Warren's advisors and how much you can blame on her. So look, I think that's a really good point. The reason why I keep bringing up her advisors is because there was a noticeable shift in her campaign strategy recently, right? And not when I say recently, it's around the time she rolled out her Medicare for All transition plan. A few months ago. And I think that there was a little bit of a shakeup with her campaign, if I remember reading the report correctly. But nonetheless, look, you're right. I mean, she should take some of the blame. She's been asked to comment on this and she's refused to do so. And so
and you're responsible for the people that you employ and the people you listen to.
Right, exactly. All right, so from the TYT Live section, CDN Norseman says, not only do I love watching TYT Live, my dog Samantha loves it too. You gotta tell us what kind of dog you have. Now I'm like,
Samantha probably likes the dogs on my tie. That's probably what it is.
And surprisingly and shockingly, as soon as she hears the theme music, she gets excited. She loves Anna's voice. I have the worst nasally voice. Yes, I recognize that I have a bad voice. It's okay.
Not the worst.
You guys still listen to me anyway, which is amazing. But anyway, let's move on to the rest of the news.
Okay.
All right. The Biden campaign is attempting to revise history and make it appear as though Joe Biden was not in favor of or supportive of the war in Iraq. In fact, they're aggressively pushing back against some of Bernie Sanders' criticisms when it comes to Joe Biden's past votes on foreign policy. And so let me just be clear, in September, Biden stated he was opposed to Bush's invasion from the get-go. I got them in, and before we know it, we had a shock and awe immediately the moment it started. I came out against the war. So he voted in favor of it. He was supportive of it until the troops were actually there. We did the preemptive war, which set a terrible precedent, by the way. And then he decided, oh, I'm against it. You can't say I was against it from the get-go when you were supportive of it, and then realize that Bush lied to you, the American people, when it came to weapons of mass destruction.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
He had also admitted that he made mistakes, right? So here's a direct quote. I did make a bad judgment, trusting the president, saying he was only doing this to get inspectors and get the UN to agree to put inspectors in. And then you have John Kerry. John Kerry has been making the media rounds. He's a supporter of Biden. He's backing Biden in this primary. And he's trying his hand at this revisionist history junk. And here he is, here's one example.
Senator Sanders has been hitting Vice President Biden about his Iraq war vote. In the last event, you said that a lot of people voted for the Iraq war and that various politicians that voted for the Iraq war were just not told the truth by the
No, what I said was we were not voting. I didn't vote to go to war immediately. I didn't vote for the war. I opposed the war when George Bush finally decided to do what he was doing. But the fact is that we were promised by a president, by an administration, that they were going to do it as a last resort after exhausting diplomacy, that if they had to go to war, it would be with a coalition that they built broadly, and that they would do it only in conjunction with our allies because it had to happen. It didn't have to happen. It was a war of choice. They broke their word with respect to how they would proceed. And so, yeah, it was a mistake to have trusted them, I guess, and we paid a high price for it. But that was not voting for the war.
That is the most insane spin I've ever heard when it comes to a bad vote.
No, I think that hundreds and thousands of dead Iraqi civilians were very convinced by that rationale right there.
This is
well,
insane.
I guess he wasn't technically in support of the war. He only voted to allow it to happen.
Yeah, and by the way, Kerry had famously said, I voted for it before I voted against it in terms of the Iraq war. Yeah. But we're not even done. There's another video. We'll get to that in just a second. Did you want to jump in?
So look, I don't want to get too focused on Kerry. He's got his own issues on this issue. But with Biden, like they're still trying to make this case that he didn't support it. We showed, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? We had the video from 1998 where he said, you know, they're talking about getting inspectors in, but honestly, I don't think is any number of inspectors until you get Saddam out of there, you're never gonna know. Like 5 years before the war, he was saying, you're never gonna know until you get rid of Saddam. I don't care how many inspectors you get.
We have one other flashback, tasty little video featuring Biden. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But more revisionist history from Cory.
I think that Bernie, regrettably, is distorting Joe's record in the following sense. I mean, he doesn't have what Joe Biden has, which is 8 years of sitting on the National Security Council and demonstrating his judgment, whether it was on his leadership dealing with the migration that was flowing across our border and helping to resolve that with the presidents of those countries, or his work pulling troops out of Iraq and negotiating that and working as perhaps the lead point man on that effort. I think that I know very well what Joe's position was, because I answered those questions back in 2002, 2003 and 4. And it was very clear that what we were doing was listening to a president who made a pledge that he was going to do diplomacy, that he was going to exhaust diplomacy, build a coalition. And ultimately, we learned, as Joe did and I did, that the intelligence was distorted. So Joe spoke out and criticized. Joe was against what they were doing. The vote was not a vote specifically to go to war. It was a vote for the president to have leverage with respect to getting Saddam Hussein back to the negotiating table, back to the inspections, excuse me.
So let's go back to a video featuring Joe Biden going after his Democratic colleagues who were a little more critical about a preemptive war in Iraq.
Some of my own party have said that it was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place, and believe that it's not worth the cost, whatever benefit may flow from our engagement in Iraq. But the cost of not acting against Saddam, I think, would have been much greater. And so is the cost, and so will be the cost, of not finishing this job. The President of the United States is a bold leader, and he is popular. The stakes are high, and the need for leadership is great. I wish he'd use some of his stored up popularity to make what I admit is not a very popular case. But I and many others will support him when he makes the case.
Oops.
I mean, how much of an assist is he getting every single day by the media in not just bang the gavel, this thing is done. He obviously supported the war in Iraq. He arguably supported it before George W. Bush supported it. And even the defense, even if that wasn't true, let's say that Kerry's pitch is completely accurate. You still gotta give the big W to Bernie for their defense is, yeah, we were just duped, man. We didn't see it coming.
I know, that's their strongest defense.
What are you supposed to do?
That's their strongest defense, and even that defense is easily debunked.
That George W. Bush, as he had Dick Cheney and surrounded himself with all these neoconservatives and all these hawks, we couldn't see it coming. We couldn't see that they were that this was going to turn into a gigantic debacle. Okay, then you're like, is that not supposed to be representative of how you'll approach foreign policy situations in the future? Bernie did see it. He did see that it was gonna be a disaster. And honestly, it's not even that it's that high of a bar. The only people that couldn't clear that bar were people who felt the political pressure in DC at the time.
Right.
But I know that when I was in my freshman year in UConn, I knew it was a stupid idea to go into that conflict then. 100%. Many of you watching this video probably felt the same. It was abundantly clear that this was gonna be a disaster.
I was in 11th grade. I'll never forget this. I've told
this story on the show before. Younger.
I know, but like not by much.
I was in kindergarten. Yeah.
Anyway, I was reading a New York Times article. I had my book. We're in English class. I have my book, but I had no interest in reading the book that was assigned to us. I was reading a New York Times article that had a bunch of quotes from Bill Kristol, who's a giant war hawk, wants to go to war with Iraq. I remember reading that piece, thinking to myself, this is such a bad idea. I really hope that we don't invade Iraq. As an 11th grader, I'm an idiot. I don't know anything, right? And I am smart enough to understand that this preemptive war would be disastrous, okay? And what we're hearing now from the Biden campaign is, I was against it from day one. Easily debunkable, right? Everyone puts out the evidence showing that he was not against it from day one. And then he says, I was lied to, I was duped, I fell for it. Okay, That's pathetic. You're trying to become the president of the United States. You should be smarter than that. But even that defense is debunkable with the video that we just showed you.
He was not just in support of it on the day that the vote happened. He was in support of it years before and years after. In both cases, he was castigating people in his party who weren't sufficiently hawkish for him. In every way that it means anything, he supported that war.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's who Joe Biden is. So when they talk about how he is willing to reach across the aisle to get things done, understand that he's not willing to do that to accomplish progressive policies that we desperately need. He's not doing that for universal health care. He's not doing that for environmental policies that might protect this planet so we can keep living on it. He's doing it to concede to what Republicans want. When you look at his record, they're all concessions when it comes to the busing issue, when it comes to war, when it comes to a host of issues that we have a problem with as progressives, that liberals should have a problem with. He, somehow gets away with it. The media doesn't cover it, but we'll cover it. And this is what the truth is. This is what he represents. This is what he stands for. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it.
We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views.
Voice Award winner, news and information channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah!
For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
A haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against
I told you we were coming.
When you talk about it, when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Patience. It's a virtue. They think you can put me in a box. But you can't stifle a revolution. Cenk Uygur, you started something, an idea. The truth and honesty matter above all else. And the people love you for it. And for a while, so did I. We could have stood united, a political force of reckoning upon our foes, the hypocrites, the phonies, the unjust. But you put me in this box.
Cenk! No!
You began without me. You began without me. But God as my witness, I will be the one to finish it.
They did 100 squats a day for 30 days straight. I was like, how hard can that be? That doesn't sound very hard. So I'm gonna try to do this for 30 days and see if there's any difference in my physique.
3 weeks later.
Steve, how is your exercise regimen coming along with your squats?
I did 100, 100, 100, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
You're pacing yourself.
Yeah.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans
the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, the most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries, primaries, primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016.
Welcome back to TYT. Few comments and then we'll get moving. The Ethernet says, my cat hates when I have TYT on. This is because she's royalty, of course.
Pay attention to me.
J-Rocks, dang. You both are pure fire today, bringing the heat. I think I'm more fiery than you today. I think you're like the reasonable one who brings in like the deets and all the like important stuff. And but I don't want to be like too unreasonably angry.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm talking.
You do, you boo.
Thinking out loud.
A wise woman once said that.
That's true. I haven't said that in a long time though. TYT Live. Orpheus says Biden even said he would nominate Bush for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh my God, did he say that?
I need to see receipts on that. I don't know if that's true. Please send us like something to confirm it. And
unfortunately, like we've piled up all these receipts, and the media's like, that doesn't look like anything to me.
I know.
It's so maddening.
I know. And Progressive Goji1 says, Kerry and Biden sound like Republicans in those clips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to really say something that I said right after we went to break. One of the things we have to bear in mind that's probably pretty obvious is there's very little incentive for most mainstream media hosts on CNN and MSNBC to come out and say, yeah, we've looked at the evidence and Joe Biden, he was dead wrong in Iraq, really looked stupid, terrible judgment there. If that means that they have to admit that they too, because almost all of them were around back then, that they were wrong on it too. And they cheered on the war as eagerly as any Senate Democrat, effectively.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know in particular Jake Tapper, Chuck, or whoever. They're not gonna come out and be like, yeah, we all were really, really stupid and a lot of people lost their lives.
Look, when it comes to government, there was one lawmaker, lone lawmaker who aggressively spoke out against invading Iraq, and
Lincoln
that was Barbara
Chafee.
Lee.
Also, yeah, Barbara Lee.
All right, well, let's move on to other news today. So this isn't a news story, but it came up again and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So the mainstream media just doesn't get progressives, and nothing makes that clearer than the way AOC has been reported on, especially when it comes to the dues that she's supposed to pay to the DCCC. Now, the DCCC notoriously is led by Sherry Bustos. They've been clear in saying that they will not support any Democratic candidate who is challenging a Democratic incumbent in primary elections. And so remember, AOC primaried an incumbent Democrat and won. So the DCCC stance is very much against people like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So with that said, recently Fox News reported on a story that was not a news story. It was actually originally reported by The Intercept, Ida Chavez to be specific. But here's the headline, Scoop, AOC withholding $250,000 in dues from the Democratic Party in protest and building her own grassroots fundraising for progressives instead. Ida Chavez, again, reporter at The Intercept, responded by saying, what part of this is a scoop? We reported this in September. I love it.
Yeah, but on the internet, does that count?
I know, right? It's
God,
incredible.
the media's terrible.
It's incredible. So check out
Months
The Intercept.
in advance, they had it.
All sorts of wonderful reporting. But now let's fill in the blanks and talk about how much of a boss AOC is when it comes to this story. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has already topped the fundraising charts in her short time in Congress, but the liberal darling won't donate a cent of her millions to Democrats' House campaign organization, a position that has rankled some of her colleagues. This is the framing by Fox News.
Don't
I want to be clear about that. I know
it's weird.
She's actually not a liberal darling. I mean, liberals can't stand her. Progressives love her.
Yeah, progressive darling. Don't say that either.
Yeah, So let me give you more. An anonymous Democratic source spoke to Fox News and gave them this quote: "Deadbeat Cortez should pay her bills. She's always whining about people paying their fair share, and here she is leaving her friends with the bill." No, this is
What?
this is so infuriating.
Deadbeat
Okay,
Cortez.
but this is the type of Democrat that we rail against on this show, right? Because she doesn't owe DCCC anything. They have come out against her aggressively.
They tried to stop her from having a career.
100%, right? And so why would she fundraise on their behalf? That's gross. Wouldn't it make more sense for her to have her own fundraising arm to help progressives who want to run for Congress?
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot more sense, and that's actually what she's doing. So more from the Fox News report. Their gripe is that Ocasio-Cortez hasn't given any money to the DCCC, the party arm with the sole job of electing Democrats to the House. I love how their sole job is to elect. How about the voters get to elect Democrats to the House?
Yeah, and it's very, technically I guess they're trying to get people elected to the House. We will disagree very much on the way they go about doing that. And you can't simply state that as if, and thus they know all that is best in life. I would argue that they're doing a really bad job of it in a lot of cases, and they could learn a hell of a lot from Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes, but Ocasio-Cortez and other freshman progressives represent everything that the Democratic establishment despises because they challenge corruption, which is a virus that's affected both parties, there's no question about it. And they go after the donors that have, that the Democratic Party has really relied on for their fundraising efforts, and they hate that. So they hate people like Ocasio-Cortez, which is why I think it's a great play by Ocasio-Cortez to avoid fundraising on their behalf. Why is she gonna give them money? That makes no sense. And so here is AOC's response. I give quite a bit to fellow Dems. We've fundraised over $300,000 for others, more than my dues, with over 50% going to swing seats. DCCC made clear that they will blacklist any org that helps progressive candidates like me. I can choose not to fund that kind of exclusion.
And thank God that she is doing that.
She's amazing.
It would be such a betrayal if she got in and then was suddenly like, yeah, I'm gonna sign up for the same sort of protection racket that the guy I beat did. And imagine if she did it, and Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all of them. They were just like, yeah, it was way harder to get elected thanks to groups like the DCCC, but now I want to be protected too, so I'm gonna help make them even stronger. That would be the ultimate betrayal.
And let's be honest, that is what I feel a lot of candidates end up doing, right? They'll run these inspiring campaigns and they'll sell themselves as these progressive firebrands. Then they get elected and they will kneel to Democratic leadership and to the DCCC. She also said via Twitter, just real quick, I want to read this. I'm also not the only one. Expanding a House majority is critical, which is why I regularly and happily fundraise sizable amounts for fellow members. I also believe that a Democratic majority should be transformative, which is why I give strategically. Seems fair, no? I totally agree. I think that's very smart. Now, she does have her own PAC. It's known as the Courage to Change PAC, and that's how she raises money. When community leaders, activists, and working class candidates try to run for office, organizations like DCCC discourage them. These potential progressive leaders are asked, can you raise $300 from your friends and family? $300,000 from your friends and family. If not, don't bother trying. That's what the website says. So I love this. I think that this is a smart move, and it really does communicate to her voters that she is not going to be pressured into conforming to the Democratic Party, that she's gonna continue fighting for them. And more importantly, she's gonna fight to get other progressives reelected or elected into Congress. And that's so important.
Yeah, because she understands that we do need to be worried about the quantity of members that are elected from the Democratic Party, but also the quality, that matters too. And I think one of the things, the undercurrents is sort of hiding in this story is that supposedly their great frustration is that she's raising all this money, but they're not getting it. I think that they would like to get the money. But I think their bigger frustration is that she's able to raise the money in the first place.
Oh yeah.
I think all of them were thinking, okay, you beat our guy, you got one over on us, but we're gonna corrupt you. We're going to you're gonna come in and you're gonna start to learn how to play ball the way we want it to be played. And she has refused to do that.
God, I love
and
the
that's
defiance.
What's so frustrating.
I know, I love it. I love it. I love that defiance, because understand the pressure to conform, understand the pressure to give them what they want. And it's so hard to stand tall and say no. No.
At the risk of potentially losing committee assignments and access and all of this stuff. And she has been willing to do that since even before the day that she was sworn in.
And real quick, just one other factoid for this story that I think is important to share. You mentioned that they can't stand how good she is at fundraising. She's real good at fundraising.
Yeah?
Yes, and remember, she's not some corrupt politician that's taking like money from shady industries, corporations, things like that. She's very much in favor of drawing attention to corruption in politics, so she raises money from small dollar donors. With that said, Ocasio-Cortez's sizable cash haul, $1.97 million in the fourth quarter, just one quarter of 2019, and over $5.3 million for the entire year, is one of the largest revealed so far among members of Congress. Get it.
In her first year, and that's more than a number of people running on the national stage for the presidential nomination. Imagine what she'll raise when she too is running on that same stage.
So there's all sorts of rumors about what her political ambitions are. I mean, you can speculate, we can have fun with that.
Will.
But she's awesome, and I'm really glad that she is, refusing to give the DCCC what they want because they don't deserve it. They don't support her. There's no reason why she should support them.
Yep.
All right, well, let's move on to other news.
You need to starve them until they change like children. Not like children, but starve them until they change.
Wait, what?
Of money.
Oh, the DCCC. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's a
wait, what are you talking
metaphor.
about? My mind was already on the next
It's a
story.
metaphor.
Yeah.
With children it's literal, but with the DCCC it's about money.
All right, you confused everyone.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was pretty clear.
Have to take a break now.
That seems like an overreaction.
No, it has nothing to do with you.
We have to check with our lawyers. What the hell?
Of the Young Turks!
Of the Young Turks!
We're here at Occupy Oakland. Yesterday, there were peaceful marches from City Hall to the port.
Young Turks was lucky enough to go to a campaign rally for Bernie Sanders.
However, the protests did turn ugly during the nighttime when a group of anarchists attempted to occupy vacant buildings. You see graffiti all over the place. There was a bonfire in the middle of the street.
Joy of the Young Turks, fourth day on Occupy Wall Street.
So we just did a tour of the whole Occupy Wall Street compound / town here.
The protests are gaining some traction.
All right, I watch this show all the time. I love it.
We can make it happen. It's amazing what's happened.
Show me what democracy looks like.
And all of a sudden, everybody feels hope. There is hope! There is hope! We can fight back! We can fight back! We will fight back! We will fight back! And we will win! And we will win!
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock.
And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock. And we're gonna run you out of town. And we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country.
November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
With Doe, you can turn your passions into potential investment opportunities. Whether it's cannabis, fashion, travel, video games, or anything in between, you tell them what you're interested in, and they'll help you uncover the investment potential. Doe provides your daily one-stop investment shop with lists of companies that relate to your personal interests, relevant news, and your favorite stocks and videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes. Go to doe.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome back to TYT. We're gonna get right to our next story out of an interest of time. And this is a doozy. So, over the weekend, the White House decided to tweet something curious considering the fact that the area has been noticeably warmer for this time of the year. And so here's what the tweet said. First snow of the year, and then they had this image of the White House with snow. Now the reason why this is strange is because the US Mid-Atlantic and Northeast is setting records for high temperatures. It has been insanely warm for this time of the year in that area. And
hot
so,
snow.
as you know, this is a topic that you've done a really good job reporting on, John.
Thank you.
Climate change is not only real, we are seeing the consequences of it today in the form of extreme weather conditions, in record-setting temperatures. And so, look, whenever we talk about climate change, I think it's really important to discuss ways in which we can force the country to do better, right? So if we just rely on the politicians we have in office right now, I don't think we're gonna get anywhere, okay? But we as consumers have a lot of power. And so if we follow the money and see how these fossil fuel companies are being financed, we have a strategy that could be highly effective. So there was a great piece written in the New York Times. Bill McKibben was one of the writers. And here's what it said. We want people to understand that the money inside the vaults of banks like Chase is driving the climate crisis. Cutting off that flow of cash may be the single quickest step we can take to rein in the fossil fuel industry and slow the rapid warming of the earth. So they actually staged a protest and did civil disobedience. Some people got arrested in order to raise awareness about this. And if you can recall, some of these big banks have actually stopped financing gun manufacturers. And so this is a very effective strategy. Let me give you more. In the last 3 years, according to data compiled in a recently released fossil fuel finance report card by a group of environmental organizations, JP Chase lent over $195 billion to gas and oil companies. Wells Fargo lent over $151 billion, Citibank lent over $129 billion, and Bank of America lent over $106 billion. Since the Paris Climate Accord, which 195 countries agreed to in 2015, JP Chase has been the world's largest investor in fossil fuels by a 29% margin. In Minnesota, for example, the Line 3 pipeline replacement project, financed in part by JP Chase, adds 337 miles of crude oil carrying pipeline across Minnesota.
Wow.
So what can you do as a consumer, as an activist? What is an easy way to apply pressure to these big banks so they stop financing fossil fuel companies? Well, you take your money out of these big banks and you invest in a financial institution that refuses to finance fossil fuel companies. So look, we talk about our partner on this show a lot, and the reason why we've partnered with them is because they do not, under any circumstance, finance fossil fuels. That's Aspiration. Aspiration is a financial institution that rewards good environmentally conscious behavior. So if you're using your debit card, for instance, at some of these environmentally conscious places like Reformation, that's my favorite clothing store. They make all their clothing here in the United States, and they make sure that they do so in a sustainable way. If you use your card there, you get some rewards, like some points and stuff like that. So check that out. Warby Parker, Tom's, Blue Apron, all of these other companies are listed on their website. But look, the most important thing is they do not finance the fossil fuel industry. Take your money out of these big banks, put it in Aspiration or any other bank that has made a similar pledge.
Yeah, and I think we need to get people to focus on this, because I think that over the past couple of decades, a lot of people have gotten much better about understanding how their consumer choices contribute or don't contribute to some of these sorts of things. And even I think TYT has been a great example of an organization that's helped people understand how campaign finance leads to certain political and economic outcomes. So we get how giving money to certain politicians can contribute to certain industries being benefited. But then like the whole time that this is going on, while we're doing all of this, our money's sitting somewhere and being used to finance exactly the opposite of our political values.
That's such a, John, you put that in such a good, easy to understand way, because look, even if you're not personally investing in fossil fuel companies, when you're keeping your money, your savings in one of these banks, let's say a CD, for instance, right? A CD is where they'll pay you interest, but you can't touch your money for an agreed upon time. What do you think they do with that money? You think they just keep it in the bank? No, they use that money to finance other companies, corporations, whatever it is. So you might be unwittingly financing fossil fuel companies by keeping your savings in these banks.
Yeah.
And so be mindful of that, be aware of that. I'm pretty sure if these banks notice a mass exit of customers, they'll be aware that their behavior, their financing habits are causing a problem for their own business model.
Well,
and
so the example that you pointed out with with guns, I think, shows that they can be influenced. And we need to put influence on, we need to put that sort of financial pressure on them, but also on the fossil fuel industries, because right now it is increasingly rare for these companies to be able to compete on cost versus certain types of renewable energy. If you are trying to make money off of like coal or methane or whatever, it's becoming more difficult. It won't take much more to flip it in even more areas. We just need to make the cost of doing business a little bit more difficult for them. And remember, they've been subsidized so much over so many decades. We could flip this thing nationally, but it's gonna take everybody working together.
Exactly. Look, I love the activism that I'm seeing. Young people are fired up, they're getting involved. The amount of discussion that's taking place on climate change is inspiring, because just like 2 years ago, this was not the case.
Yeah.
And so if you do want to get active, if you are interested in taking your money out of one of these big banks and transferring it over to a decent financial institution that doesn't want to invest in fossil fuel companies, please check out Aspiration, aspiration.com/TYT to learn more. All right, well, with that said, let's move on to a fun story. The story I've been waiting to talk about all day. So, Caitlyn Bennett is a bit of a provocateur. I really don't know much about her other than the fact that she used to work for Alex Jones, and now she kind of hosts her own thing called Liberty Hangout. She also was part of Turning Point USA, and they ousted her. Not really sure why, don't really care. But she goes onto these college campuses and she tries to provoke students on social issues like transgender bathrooms. And so I don't know why she put this video out. It's incredibly embarrassing for her, but nonetheless she has. And we're gonna show you the relevant snippets and laugh. So let's take a look at the first.
What's in your laptop case?
Laptop?
Your laptop. Are you sure? That's not what I heard. I have an important question for you.
Okay.
What do you think about putting urinals in the women's restroom for women who have penises?
I don't care about that.
Cut it.
That, my hero. I don't care, just walking away. And the way she started that video too, it was just.
I don't understand, like
What's in your laptop bag? My laptop. That's not what I heard.
Bazinga.
Okay.
Yeah, he's gonna be thinking about that later. He got owned, lived tears. I don't understand what that means. Is that a reference? We're gonna find out it's secretly a thing that the Nazis said. They have to fit in one of those references, basically.
I don't know, she's she's not cut out for this, okay? She's not talented, she's not skilled. These like man on the street interviews could actually be really good. And you're about to see through the series of videos that we have for you that she is not cut out for it. So let's take a look at the next one.
Should we put urinals in the women's restrooms here on campus to be more inclusive to women who have penises? You know, they stand up when they pee.
I mean, if there's the money in the budget for it, sure.
Okay, well, what if there was money to put free tampons and pads in men's restrooms for men who have periods?
If there's budget, I don't see a problem.
Do you see a problem with me asking you about men having periods?
No, I mean, it's a college campus. There's a lot of ideas to share. I mean,
What is a period?
I mean, what?
So like, that guy is just like, hey, I'm a nice, kind of understanding, tolerant guy.
He's so nice.
He's
I
just
love his
being nice.
blazer. He's so like everything about that guy I loved. Like he was so polite. I think the way he answered the questions were great. Everything about him, and
I don't know what she was trying to accomplish there.
Embarrassing yourself and then putting the she's putting the video out. Like
because they probably spent $10,000 on that trip and they have to put something up.
Maybe.
Can you really blame her? She goes on Twitter and she sees all these other man on the street right-wing idiots and she's like, wow, it doesn't take any smarts or talent to do this, sign me up. And then she realized the one standard is you're supposed to be selective of which ones you upload. And also the way you ask questions. The whole reason they go there is not to learn about what people think or what's actually going on campus. It's to make them look bad.
Yes.
But you're just asking like reasonable questions that are yes and no. What could they have possibly said that would make them look bad there?
Listen, if there were a video of me asking a man on a college campus what is a period, I would be mortified that that video exists and I would do everything in my power to destroy it.
Maybe she wants to learn.
What is a period?
I don't know.
Well, there's more. Let's take a look at the next one.
There's more than people think.
What, men having periods?
Yeah.
By God. Did you tell them to seek medical help if men are having periods?
Well, trans men have periods.
Okay. Okay, explain that one to me.
Yeah, so people who have transitioned from female to male, obviously, they might still have periods, and if they identify as male, they have the right to go into the men's room. But if they're still having periods, they have the right to have, the products they need.
Yeah, that was a very
reasonable.
smart answer, reasonable answer. I'm waiting, like every time these videos come up, I'm waiting for her like owning of the libs or the rebuttal, but there's never any of that, right?
I think she did think that she did you ask him for medical help?
Yeah.
I think, does she have something in her ear? Because she kind of like looked. I think that she thinks she's getting them. And that theory is buttressed by the fact that she puts out the videos. I think that she thinks that's awesome. And I bet, how many retweets did she get on this stuff?
I mean,
there's a lot of stupid people.
I saw this video on Twitter and it got quite a bit of attention, but not in the way that she was hoping for obvious reasons. Okay, so we got to get to the final one and then we'll have a more substantive discussion about this.
Sure we will.
Yeah, okay, take a look.
What do you think about putting urinals in women's restrooms for women who have penises and they just want to stand and pee?
I think people just making too big of a deal about it. I don't really care.
Naughty words. Okay, so we should or shouldn't?
I mean, I don't really care.
Okay, what about tampons and pads in men's restroom for men who have periods?
If you're really getting that worked up about it, why does it matter? Like, I don't care. It's just sitting there. I'm not gonna take it.
Okay, so we should provide men with tampons.
I mean, if a dude wants a tampon for some reason, he can have a tampon. That's not my business.
What would he use it for?
I don't know. That's his problem.
What would he use a pad for?
His problem.
Do you think they should seek medical advice if they're having bleeding?
I mean, if they want to, I don't really care. Why should I care?
I don't know, I care about people. If they're bleeding out of their penis, I would want to.
I care about people's personal rights. They can do whatever they want. It's none of my business.
Okay, that final part is what I love the most about that clip, because he mentions personal rights, which a woman who hosts a show called Liberty Hangout should care about, right?
He might be a libertarian, for all we know.
I know nothing about these students. All I know is that they answered these questions well, and I'm proud of them. And it also, look, this is the reason, another reason why I love like the series of videos that have been tweeted all over the place. Because it demonstrates that the things that conservatives latch onto and make a big deal about, the big controversial issues like transgender bathrooms, are not issues that regular college students are up in arms about, right?
They pretend that they are.
They pretend, they speak on behalf of college students to make it seem like, oh my God, allowing people to go to the bathroom that they identify with is, it's the most controversial. No, these are kids who are, most of them are adults, I shouldn't call them kids, but they're drowning in student loan debt. They're concerned about what the economic situation is gonna look like for them when they graduate. They care about issues that actually matter to them. Allowing people to feel accepted in society is not something that they're like losing sleep over. But those are the issues that conservatives will blow out of proportion to make it seem like it's the most important problem that we need to think about and focus all our energy on.
Yeah, look, she made that comment about blood coming out of a penis. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't know what a transgender man or a transgender woman is.
Right.
And the thing is, when you say that someone cares about a topic, that can mean one of two things. It can mean that they care, they actually care about what happens to a person, or it could mean that they obsess about it. You really care about that. Those people that she talked to, the students, they care. They actually care about the quality of life of people.
They do,
and if it doesn't infringe on them, it's no skin off their back. People like her and people like Ben Shapiro, they care as in obsess over these issues. Ben Shapiro can't do one show without talking about the transgender community. And there's no caring in it. There's no compassion, there's no empathy for her. She doesn't even know what she's physically talking about, but she's taking trips around the country on this issue. Maybe have a little bit less caring and a little bit more actual caring.
Right, and just read a book. I just want-
Read a Wikipedia article.
Anything, just educate yourself so you don't look like an absolute bumbling fool when you're out there doing these interviews. But okay, and I have one final point to make about this, and I don't know if it's controversial, but it's genuinely how I feel. I'm really happy that the majority of these interviews consisted of young white males, because I think that most of what we hear from white males in the media is negative, and I think that it's unfair. Like, I don't think that those people are representative of all white men. I think that they get a bad rap, and I love seeing these young white guys say things that are not only accurate, but important for the transgender community. So just be aware of that. Don't buy into any type of generalization, whether it has to do with white men or Muslims or any other group of people. That was really wonderful to see. Anyway, with that said, that does it for the second hour. Mark Thompson will be doing the conversation, and that is next. Stick around.
We are on to something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors
they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate PAC money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats, we're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free health care for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer health care, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a betting.
Absolutely not. I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content, so I deliver everything that you lovely people see.
We are monitoring transmissions and levels, just making sure everything is FCC compliant, because you will get fined if you are out of the range. And this is our master control room, which we had to build because we were doing this all piecemeal and it was hard to keep track of everything. So we have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
What's J&A?
Cory and Arthur.
You guys share a mug?
Yeah, you both take our hot cocoa black.
That doesn't make any sense.
Plus, I'm right-handed and Arthur's left-handed, so our lips wouldn't even touch the same area. It's perfect.
No, I'm not left-handed.
What do you mean? I've seen you type with your left hand.
Yeah, and also with my right hand. That's how typing works.
This is what democracy looks like.
When I think back to the debates in 2016, this was a very different party that was debating.
First time in my lifetime that I've actually had progressives represent us. Here comes Bernie.
This whole debate tonight was shaped by progressives.
We have to live our values every day in a campaign.
She came with receipts. That was her strongest moment by far.
This is going to be one of the best primaries we've ever seen.
This is what we've been saying would happen, and now it's playing out on the debate stage.
Hi, I'm Mark Thompson here for Cenk. Always fun to be in on the conversation, and as usual, really interesting show. And one of the things I love about this show, we'll get right into it, is that we talk about money in politics, and it's clearly the issue confronting this country. I mean, you have to open up the hood on any number of things, but if you could get somehow the money out of our political process, you do so much to increase the purity of the people's voice in the elections. But that said, what actually happens with that money? This is a story about that. And that's really what I love about this particular part of the conversation. Dave Leventhal joins us, and Dave is the editor-at-large at the Center for Public Integrity. Dave, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, Mark, good to be with you.
I I love that you're here, as I say, because we talk about money in politics, but now let's really just put a face on this that has a little more detail. One of the things that money does is that moneyed interests pursue various legislative agendas, and they actually pursue legislation that they write, those moneyed interests write. Take us through some of that process, will you?
Well, sure. We've seen this at the local, the state, and the federal level. And in fact, we just put forth a project last year in conjunction with USA Today and the Arizona Republic that showed that various special interests, in fact, hundreds upon hundreds of special interests, will oftentimes get behind what we like to call model legislation. Now, what is model legislation? Model legislation, very simply, are bills that are not written by lawmakers. They're not written by your elected representatives. They're written by special interests. That may be a corporate special interest, in some cases a union special interest. But be that what it may, these are copycat bills. They are quite literally cut and pasted, and they might be introduced in 1, 2, 10, 20, even 50 states with effectively verbatim language. So instead of getting something from your local representatives, you're getting something from your national special interest that could have profound effects on the way that your locality is actually being run and being governed.
This is remarkable, because what you're seeing is your local legislators' face on it, your local legislator's name on it, but that's just almost a shell company for what is legislation that is written by these moneyed interests.
Well, in a way, it's outsourcing of the legislative process. Instead of having that elected lawmaker or his or her staff writing the bill, you're having something that effectively is being given to that legislator and then being introduced through the legislative process. So in many cases, it's unclear to the public that this is even happening. And we now have a tracker tool that you can go and you can search for yourself. Oftentimes, if you have a special interest yourself in an issue, a topic, you can type that in. It might be marijuana, it might be taxes, it could be any topic under the political sun, and you can find out if that bill is being introduced in your, say, home state of Kansas, and also Idaho and Ohio and Florida and California and everywhere else around the country. It's something that you couldn't do before and you can do now.
I don't want to move on from this too quickly, because this is a really cool thing you're talking about. There's an algorithm that looks at language, and you can actually see that this language in so many of these different bills is the same. And in so doing, you can identify where these moneyed interests have spread that bill or that legislation across the country.
Well, a labor of love from an incredible data journalist, Pratik Rabala at the Center for Public Integrity, who spearheaded the creation of this. So yes, exactly as you described it, you can go and you can search for yourself to determine if there is copycat legislation being introduced in your state, or if there's copycat legislation, again, on a topic that you care about, being introduced all throughout the country, and who's behind that as well.
This, when I saw it, made me think of like a Sinclair Broadcasting, where they buy up a bunch of stations across the country, and then they crank out these must runs, they call them, pieces of news that really reflect opinion or a point of view without telling the audience that this is stuff that we put together and we've omitted key facts or whatever it may be. And that goes out to all the Sinclair stations. So it's run nationwide. This reminds me on a legislative basis of just that phenomenon.
Well, there are legislative engines, these copycat legislation engines that exist. Probably one that would be familiar to most people is ALEC. ALEC is a group of very conservative-minded entities that oftentimes will sponsor model legislation of this sort. So you see model legislation coming from the right, from conservative sources for sure. Also, too, it's something that has been used and utilized on the left, albeit to a lesser degree. So both sides, to some extent, are playing this game. And it, again, the reason we did this project, which included numbers of articles, several dozen articles in addition to this tracker that we just talked about, is so people can realize, number one, that this stuff exists, but also to the effect on it and how it affects just across the board so many issues, including a lot of pocketbook issues that affect people's bottom lines and the way that you live your life: food, cars, you name it. Model legislation, there's a good chance that there's something out there that exactly hits on one of those topics.
In a moment, I want to get to the election, but before we leave this topic, I'm glad you mentioned that both sides do it to an extent. We see it more on the right and through the GOP, but this is what's good about your program, about this sort of algorithm, as you can see. I mean, maybe it's legislation that you actually are okay with, but you can also see some of the really disturbing legislation, the anti-Islamic legislation that's passing through these various legislative bodies. There's a piece of car dealer legislation that I was reading about that also seemed kind of, shall we say, sketchy.
And we've talked to plenty of people who are, if not supporters of the notion of model legislation, will make the case that model legislation in and of itself is not inherently bad. It's not inherently evil. It's a technique, a tool, a political vehicle for trying to propagate something that people believe in. Well, at its face, that might sound perfectly fine. The problem is when the public doesn't realize that legislation, again, as we just discussed, isn't coming necessarily from lawmakers. It's coming from somewhere else, but has the imprimatur of a lawmaker, has their name on it, has her name on it, and is going forward as something that ultimately it really isn't.
That's the thing. We think of this as a process by which we elect officials that have shared with us their philosophy, their outlook, those things that they feel are important, their priorities, if you will. And then to see that whole thing sort of subverted or undermined in this way, and they just get, in essence, an email that outlines the verbiage for the next piece of legislation because they, in a sense, are taken hostage by big moneyed interests. That's disturbing. But
there's a reason we call lawmakers, because they're supposed to make laws. So the fact that that's not happening all the time kind of undercuts the notion that they truly are the ones who are making those laws and passing those bills.
Now on to the election and the FEC, Federal Election Commission. You did a great piece, I thought, about just this fact, which is that Donald Trump, the FEC, critical, right, in safeguarding elections. Tell everybody about the FEC, and then we'll talk about what's happening to it.
Well, in short, the Federal Election Commission was created in the ashes of Watergate. It was set up to be a civil law enforcement body that was going to enforce and regulate the nation's campaign laws in a central bipartisan fashion, and also to take care of the transparency element of campaign finance, making sure that the public, that the press, everyone had access to information coming from campaigns about how much money they're raising, how much money they're spending, if they go into debt, or any other financial consideration. So 45 years later, though, the FEC is not necessarily lived up to those lofty expectations that it was going to be a cop on the beat. And right now, Mark, as we speak right now, the Federal Election Commission doesn't have enough commissioners to take care of that law enforcement component of its duty. It doesn't have a quorum, and until it gets one of at least 4 commissioners on the 6-commissioner body, the FEC is pretty much dead in the water when it comes to enforcing the nation's campaign finance laws.
And this was a deliberate act, was it not?
Well, it's a deliberate act in the sense that the President of the United States has to nominate Federal Election Commission commissioners. The U.S. Senate has to go ahead and approve those nominees. And Donald Trump has only put forward one person, a man by the name of Trey Traynor, whose nomination has since lapsed in the past couple of weeks. But we can blame, to an extent, Barack Obama and George W. Bush for this, too, because both of them had opportunities themselves to inject new blood into the Federal Election Commission, to either appoint new commissioners, nominate new commissioners, or for that matter, fill the jobs of commissioners who have overstayed their terms. And this has been a habitual problem over the past many years for the FEC. Commissioners are only supposed to be there 6 years, but all the commissioners at one point in time not long ago had overstayed their terms, and then they began to fall away. They resigned, they went elsewhere, and now we only have 3 commissioners left. I've talked to 2 of those 3 who weren't able even to answer the question when I posed it to them as to whether they're willing to stay throughout 2020. Not that there's a whole lot for them to do at this point. So things could get worse at the FEC before they get better, and they're pretty darn bleak right now.
Why would there be and we're running out of time here, I'm sorry, but I do have to ask you, why would there be an interest in sort of defanging the FEC from, as you suggest, sort of both parties? Why would you let something that seems such a critical part of the democratic process lapse like this?
Well, we focus in our story today at the Center for Public Integrity on one particular case among 300 plus that we could have chosen from that are not being taken care of, cases that the FEC should be looking into. And that's one that involves Donald Trump himself. There is a complaint from Representative Bill Pascrell, congressman from New Jersey, and he's basically saying, hey, look, FEC, you need to look into the way that Donald Trump is accounting for bills that he is receiving from municipal governments all across the country for police protection at his different campaign rallies. He's not doing it the right way. He's not accounting for it properly. That's the case that's being made. The FEC got back to him and said, well, we can't do anything about it because we don't have enough commissioners to see this complaint through. And well, who's the person who would nominate FEC commissioners to give the FEC the ability to investigate that complaint? Donald Trump. So you can see right there that this is an issue, particularly when you have the person who is the subject to a complaint, the President of the United States, also responsible for nominating commissioners to the FEC, which is tasked with investigating those types of complaints.
It feels more like a banana republic every day in this country. Just insanity. Dave Leventhal, love your stuff. Center for Public Integrity. The website is publicintegrity.org. Check it out. So much great stuff. So many terrific revelations. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a great night.
See you, Dave. The conversation comes back, and some, shall we say, some hard medicine about Pete Buttigieg next.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding, because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
That's 300 million. That's a pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks crosses 6 billion views.
Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
With Doe, you can turn your passions into potential investment opportunities. Whether it's cannabis, fashion, travel, video games, or anything in between, you tell them what you're interested in, and they'll help you uncover the investment potential. Doe provides your daily one-stop investment shop with lists of companies that relate to your personal interests, relevant news, and your favorite stocks and videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes. Go to doe.com/TYT.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
Welcome back to the conversation. I'm Mark Thompson here for Cenk. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now we'll change gears and talk about something that's really quite a revelation. And that's what's been going on in Mayor Pete's hometown with his police force and with the racism that really underlies that police force. And this is all as a result of some investigative reporting from Jonathan Larson and in conjunction with the Root. And Jonathan Larson, welcome to the conversation. I appreciate you not only being here, but walking us through what is sort of an interesting, complex, only in the sense that there are many instances of it, kind of investigation that you guys did.
Sure. So thank you, Mark. Mike Harriet of the Root and I, we collaborated on this piece, which was specifically kind of narrowly focused on a group of 10 officers who signed letters back in 2014 addressed both to Buttigieg and to other city agencies, raising flags about racism within the police department. And I should add that I spoke to people back in April. I went to South Bend last April and spoke to people about racism on the force. And even people who said, yes, they knew about racist cops, they also took pains to say that largely that is not the case with the police force. But the question obviously in the presidential race is the racism that was there, what form did it take and what did Pete Buttigieg do about it? And with Mike from the Root, he and I reached out to some of these officers and we were not able to find any indication that Buttigieg responded to them, that the city responded to them in any official way saying, we want to hear about what's going on and we want to hear your thoughts about what's happening. And there were 3 additional officers, not even among those 10 signatories, who had filed EEOC complaints. There were lawsuits as well, and the bottom line was that essentially in the scope of this report, we weren't able to find anyone who Buttigieg reached out to and said, tell me what you're experiencing, and let's see if we can get to the bottom of it.
No, in fact, it would seem that Buttigieg was concerned with sort of covering the whole thing up, spinning it, paying people off. I mean, I'm talking about settlements, and oddly just dodging the entire thing. This involves recordings that he that were out there that document a sort of underlying or overt, but it's behind the curtain of what's going on, racism, and yet he ultimately claimed in the case of the tapes that he'd never heard them, and in other words, muddying the water, I suppose, might be a way to term his reaction.
Well, the reaction to our reporting has been less muddying the water than ignoring the stream. But I will say that the campaign has told us, and they will tell anyone who asks, that they did implement a number of measures over the years to try to address issues of racism within the police department. Obviously, whether those measures were sufficient, whether they were executed appropriately, that's a matter of some debate. But in this specific case, these officers individually reached out and didn't get a response. And as for the tapes, we reported back in September, based on legal documents that the city has had, what was on the tapes. Now, there's no reason to think that Buttigieg is being anything less than honest when he says he has not heard what's on the tapes. But he has said, for instance, I don't know if I can legally even ask what's on the tapes. But in fact, his lawyers acting on his behalf, both as the mayor and as an individual, did ask the woman who heard the tapes, who made the tapes because of what she heard on the police phone recordings. They did ask her multiple questions and she got answers. So the city has actually known, at least the legal department and Buttigieg's outside counsel, they've known for years what was on the tapes.
Just because we're talking about the tapes and people may or may not be really up to speed on it, I mean, the piece is really great, and I hope that people will get up to speed on it. But let's go through, in the case of the tapes, just as we're talking about them, let's talk about what's on these tapes, why they are a radioactive part of this entire issue.
So the tapes came to light in March of 2012 when Buttigieg, 3 months into his mayoralty, demoted the city's first black police chief, who had been there since 2007. And the explanation he gave was that the chief was being investigated by the FBI for allegations of wiretapping his police officers, which was not untrue as far as it went, but there was more to the story. We haven't really had a full sense until recently of what more to the story was. The woman who I alluded to earlier, who made the tapes from the phone recordings, she said in her lawsuit, she referred years ago to an apparent scheme to get rid of the chief. We didn't have a sense of what that referred to, and thanks to various court orders and judicial rulings, she's not been allowed to speak publicly. But the documents that we accessed back in September lay out in her words, she says she heard police officers talking about using Buttigieg's donors to get him to agree to get rid of the black police chief. The officers are also described as speaking in Ebonics when referring to the chief. And Buttigieg is said in these documents to have agreed in June of 2011, 6 months before he even became mayor, to get rid of the chief. So that's been in those documents for years. And even after I mean, obviously we reached out to the campaign for comment, but we got none on the substance of the documents, and he has not commented on that aspect of the reporting either. And I should add, and they will tell you, that the two donors I spoke with essentially denied having these conversations. One said, I have no knowledge of that, and then hung up on me. The other denied throwing fundraisers for Buttigieg, and then did not respond when I emailed him a copy of a flyer for an invitation to a fundraiser that had his name on it.
The city settled with the chief, Boykins, and that's that. And you can read more about the tapes and really how the entire thing was handled. I want to move on to something else, because it's not just about that. It's really about an institutional racism within the department. And boy, even if you just look at the numbers, it's sort of, they're on pretty thin ice when it comes to hiring and promoting black officers.
Yeah, so just the raw data are not great in terms of the record. And Buttigieg, I think to his credit, has acknowledged we couldn't get it done. But it's not just that diversity remained the same while he was mayor of the city. The proportion of black officers on the force is about 240 people or so, and the proportion went from something like almost 30 black people on the force to barely a dozen, if I'm remembering correctly, or slightly more than that.
Yeah, 15 black officers 6%. Is where it ended up, exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, roughly 6% of the force now is black, in a city where I believe the black population is above 1/4 of the total population.
And it extends even beyond that. So those are the numbers. But when it comes to promotions, and when you outline quite specifically, I'm thinking of the shift interview that is undergone. It comes to very simple promotions that within the department. In other words, just sort of these things that would almost be a pro forma administrative process. They take on the taint of a racism.
Well, Mike and I have talked about this, and he actually did, I would say, a little bit more of the legwork on that end of things than I did. But a point that Mike will make, I think, is that it doesn't have to be individual racism. The fact that the system doesn't seem at the time to have been sort of engineered to guard against that kind of thing means that it's a lot easier for sort of old boy network dynamics to drive the hiring process. And so in an anecdote that Mike tells, I think this is what you're referring to, there was one black lieutenant who believed that there was an open lieutenant position on another shift, which would be a lateral position for him. He applied for it. None of the other eligible black officers applied out of solidarity with that lieutenant, thinking we'll apply for his position once it opens up. But no one apparently told the black officers that there were actually 3 lieutenants' positions. So they ended up all going to white officers, and the response was, well, none of the black officers applied. Yeah, they weren't in the loop. They didn't know the full scope of what was going to be available. So it was things like that. And one officer actually told me, one of the ones who signed one of those letters, he said to me that Pete Buttigieg set the department back years when he demoted Boykins, because the improvements, or at least some of the improvements that Boykins made, were then rolled back. Now he spoke more favorably of the current chief, but the numbers still are what the numbers are.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually get into the specifics here, it's so damning and humiliating, the process by which many of these black officers applied for or were locked out of some of these, as you suggest, sort of lateral moves. But their basic complaints boil down to 5 things, as at least listed in your piece. White officers regularly got promotions, transfers, and positions that were not publicly advertised to black officers. That's what we've just detailed. Black officers were rarely promoted, which is something we've also sort of alluded to. White officers were selected to fill temporary positions when the department's black candidates applied for the permanent positions. The white ones would already have an advantage because they'd already done the job. I mean, it's almost this bizarre catch-22. White officers would not back up black officers, this is the one I really wanted to get to, back up black officers when they were in danger or needed help. White officers were rarely disciplined, while black officers were disciplined very harshly. I think the backup example, you give one in your piece, it's chilling, honestly.
So this was a story that TYT actually broke over the summer. It concerns Ron Teachman, who was at the time then relatively new to the position of chief. He was meeting with some of his top ranking officers, including on one occasion outside the station house, outside the police headquarters, with a black lieutenant. At one point, someone came in, reported there was an altercation outside involving a gun. The 2 officers were not together when this came in, so the black officer went outside to address the situation, and the white chief did not come outside until after it was all over. And this was a point of real contention. The black activist, a reverend who first raised this complaint, told the city council that he went to Buttigieg himself about it first and did not feel like he was heard. And that's why it led to the city council hearing about it, and eventually it made its way to an Indiana State Police investigation. And the former head of the Board of Public Safety, which has oversight over the police, told us that a city attorney claimed to have been fired by Buttigieg for failing to prevent the Indiana State Police investigation. And the Indiana State Police ultimately released a report which was secret. And the president of the Board of Public Safety resigned over the way Buttigieg responded to the report. Buttigieg characterized it essentially as exonerating the chief. And we obtained a copy of the report's summary and additional material from the report, which contradict the way Buttigieg described it publicly at the time.
This is just great work from TYT and The Root. And Jonathan Larson, thank you for spending a few minutes with us. We've really just scratched the surface. People say that, but this truly is an instance in which you should go to TYT.com and read this piece. And in its detail, I was never drunk on Pete Buttigieg for a second, but I know that there is this sort of media drunkenness around him, and everyone owes it to themselves to take a look at this great reporting. Thanks, Jonathan Larson.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. That's it for the conversation today. I'm on the podcast. Of course, it's called The Edge with Mark Thompson. There's a new episode, I think, going up later this week. And of course, I'm on KGO Radio every day from 10 to noon Pacific time. Join us there at kgoradio.com. But my favorite thing in the world is spending some time here at TYT. So thank you for joining us today. And until next time, bye-bye.